I was stunned for a moment. I looked up. The man was wearing a black shirt, with a tall and straight figure, deep eyes, bathed in the morning sun, as if standing in the light. His handsome face looked lazy and indifferent. But at this moment, his face turned slightly pale, and he nervously looked at me. Ding! Wisnovel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Seeing that I was unharmed, he relaxed his expression, his gaze pausing on my suitcase for 2 seconds. Then he spoke, hesitantly. Sara, have you run away from home? It was Chris Lowe. More precisely, a much younger Chris Lowe. Memories from the past quickly flashed through my mind. His gentle gaze, his lazy yawns, him holding my hand step by step into marriage, finally freezing it that evening when he first met me. He seemed lazy, but secretly clenched his hand, asking me, Sara, will you marry me? At that moment, my heart beat rapidly, and my eyes were reluctant to leave the man for a moment, until his panicked expression widened his eyes, exclaiming, Sara, why are you crying? Who bullied you? I cried? Why would I cry? Seeing him again, I should be happy, but the emotion suppressed in my heart from the past life turned into tears, flowing out from the depths of my heart. The tears couldn't be stopped. I cried. Chris quietly accompanied me. After a long time, he embraced me, his voice low, with a hint of helplessness and indulgence, as if coaxing a beloved child. Sara, don't cry. Who bullied you? I'll help you get revenge, okay? Not okay. I held his sleeve tightly, shaking my head. No revenge. In this life, I just want to be with you. I don't want anything else. I followed Chris back to his apartment. The apartment was cold and empty. That's his style. In a past life, after Chris passed away, I lived here for a long time. It's like a memorial, and also like reminiscence. I can't quite explain it. I was already familiar with the layout here, but I didn't notice that as I skillfully walked to the deepest part, turned corners, pushed doors, and entered the bathroom, Chris's gaze flickered for a moment. Looking at my swollen, disheveled self in the mirror, I sighed softly, feeling a bit embarrassed. I had already made up my mind to face Chris decently, but every time we met, I always looked so disheveled. But it's okay. Chris loves me so much. He won't despise me. Absolutely not. This is the most certain thing in my life. Walking out of the bathroom, Chris was leaning against the door waiting for me. He asked me, why are you crying? I calmly recounted everything that had just happened. There's nothing to hide between him and me. After listening, Chris paused for a moment. So, the Bassett family wants to frame you? I nodded, but I refused. This matter won't end so easily. Even though Erin is seriously injured and unconscious, with no substantial evidence, she can only be charged when she wakes up. Even though Zoe is currently considered a major suspect by the police, your suspicion is not unfounded. The more he spoke, the darker his face became. I suddenly interrupted him. Chris, I'm a bit hungry. He hesitated, his gaze falling on me. Seeing my clear eyes without a hint of nervousness, he sighed helplessly. I'll cook. I nodded. In a past life, I had a serious stomach illness, and Chris specially learned medicinal cuisine and cooked for me every day. He's very skilled. I used to think he was naturally good at cooking, but at this moment, as I saw the lump of noodles he brought over, I suddenly realized that Chris, a young master, had always been served by others. How could he have known how to cook from the beginning? He learned for me. Always for me. I picked up the chopsticks and took a bite. Quite salty. But Chris looked at me expectantly. Is it delicious? His eyes shimmered with tiny stars. Very beautiful. Just like the man in my memory who smiled and asked if I liked him. I lowered my head, holding back the sour emotions, and nodded heavily. Delicious. And I really like it. But the bowl of noodles was finally thrown into the trash. Because I cried, Chris thought it was bad and made me cry. He picked up the chopsticks and took a bite. Then, the next second, the bowl of noodles ended up in the trash. He frowned, looking dissatisfied. I want to cry too. Why is it so bad? Very cute. I couldn't help but laugh, dispersing the tension between my eyebrows. I encouraged him. It's okay. The future you will definitely cook well. Why? I smiled. Because I will be your only diner in the future. The man's eyes flickered. His eyes seemed pensive, with a mysterious and profound look. He said in a deep voice, Sara, what are you to me in the future? I was stunned for a moment. Looking up at him, I met his pitch-black eyes, confident and determined. He guessed it. As always, he was so clever. Perhaps it is. I paused for a moment, then slowly said, lover, lover, people in love. I thought Chris might be stunned or frown and ask more questions, but he softened his face, his eyes slightly curved, his lips lifted, losing the casual indifference, appearing sincere. He said, that's good, that's good. Watching the teardrop mold trembling at the corner of his eyes as he smiled, I suddenly wanted to taste what it was like. I thought about it, then did it. I raised my foot and kissed him. In his astonished gaze, I smiled brightly. Chris Lowe, I really love you. I forgot to tell you in the previous life. This life, let me tell you, I love you. Always have. Before going to sleep, Chris covered me with a blanket. If you're scared, call me, I'll come over right away. Before leaving, he placed the amulet he wore on his neck in my palm. I knew this. Chris was weak as a child, and Mrs. Lowe prayed for the amulet to protect him, to help him grow up. Now, he also uses it to protect my safety empty. I held the jade pendant, my heart beating irregularly, my cheeks even hotter. Not until Chris slowly walked out and closed the door. I suddenly felt a bit sour on my face, touched my mouth, and realized I had been smiling all along. My heart was also full. Chris is always like this, seemingly a playboy, never caring about anything, but actually the most caring and gentle person. And this night, I couldn't sleep until midnight, a little excited and a little scared. Glancing at the phone next to the pillow, I wondered if Chris had fallen asleep. I was a bit afraid to disturb him by calling. I might as well send a text message. "Are you asleep?" Just as I sent it, I felt it was a bit unnecessary and thought about retracting it. Suddenly, footsteps sounded at the door. Then, the sound of the door being pushed open. When I opened my eyes again, Chris was already standing in front of my window bed. The moonlight shone through the window, casting a soft light on Chris's shoulders, softening his sharp edges. He bent down and gently asked, "Sara, what's wrong?" It hadn't been a minute since I sent the message, but he was already here. He was really living up to his words. He said he would come, no matter how late, he would come. Perhaps, like me, he hadn't slept a wink this night, just because he was afraid I really needed him. Thinking of this, my heart twisted painfully. It hurt and felt suffocating. I stayed at Chris's home for half a month like this. The most interesting thing was waiting for Chris to come back home. He was busy in the kitchen with his cooking skills, while I leaned against the door, quietly watching him. Occasionally, I would lend him a hand. Under the warm yellow light, he combed his hair back, revealing a handsome yet somewhat naive face, covered with a layer of soft gauze, exuding a hint of gentleness. At this moment, he had not yet graduated from college. Compared to the decisive Chris from the previous life, he now appeared slightly naive and tender. This was a time that I had never been involved in or known about. Occasionally, he would look up and his lips would gently curl up. The clear love in his eyes was unmistakable. He really liked me. At that moment, I realized that in a time unknown to me, Chris truly liked me with all his heart. My heart suddenly tightened, and the emotions in my chest flowed through my body with my blood, finally turning into a long sigh. Watching Chris's culinary skills improve day by day, the Bassett family could no longer hold back. I had thought that the Bassett family would not let Zoe confess and go to prison so easily, but I didn't expect that the Bassett family would bribe Aaron's agent to point me out as the real mastermind. So shameless, so despicable. In front of the camera, Mrs. Bassett revealed the background of both Zoe and me. She cried with tears in her eyes. I really didn't expect Sara to deliberately harm others. She has always been a good child, but now, in order to avoid punishment, she actually framed her own sister. Although Zoe is my biological daughter, she has not enjoyed many days of happiness. Now, she's being falsely accused and may go to prison. Sara really disappoints me. Zoe nestled in her mother's arms, awkwardly wiping away her tears, letting her own tears flow down her cheeks. "Mom, please don't be sad. Sister must have made a mistake out of confusion. If I can atone for her, I'm willing to do it. As long as she can take care of you, that's enough." The mother and daughter wept pitifully in front of the media. The one who makes a mistake must take responsibility. You don't need to bear what you shouldn't bear. Finally, Mr. Bassett faced the camera, speaking sternly. "Sara, the Bassett family has raised you for so many years. We hope you can come forward and atone for your mistakes." Once the video was released, there was an uproar on the internet. Such an ingrate, a fake heiress who has enjoyed so many years of luxury, but let the Bassett family's real daughter take the blame for her. Is she even human? Sara Bassett, you wicked woman. Dare to do, but not to admit. Truly disgusting. Yes, the Bassett family has been so kind to you. You repay their kindness with ingratitude. Truly despicable. The insults continued. My private social account was also exposed, receiving an explosion of private messages daily. Even former classmates called to inquire about my situation. I replied to those who cared about me occasionally. Those asking me to confess were immediately blocked. Despite the continuous external disturbances, I did nothing. As long as the police did not summon me, I was innocent. There was no need to panic and fall into a trap of self-incrimination. When Chris received the news that day, he hurried home and said right away, "I can help you." I smiled. "No need, I can handle it myself." But as I was speaking, for some reason, I suddenly remembered something that happened in the previous life. A fierce argument, but it was said to be fierce. In reality, it was just because Chris was too good to me, which made many people jealous. Some spread rumors behind my back that I had been to prison, and there were criticisms online. But in the end, it was just that I wasn't worthy of Chris. Chris wanted to help me get rid of the gossip. He wanted to attend the press conference with me and sue those who were spreading rumors. But I felt it was unnecessary. I had been to prison before, and although I had a clear conscience, I didn't want Chris to be criticized because of me. But this angered Chris. He coldly questioned me if I cared about him, if I saw him as a husband, but I just felt that handling it coldly was better, thinking he was being unreasonable and irrational. That day, the living room was not lit, only the lingering sunset. After a long silence, he sneered and gently said a sentence. "You live a clean life. I can't tolerate others pointing fingers at you. Sara, do you understand?" I remained silent and refused to reply to him. As I left, I looked back and could see his lonely figure. I regretted a bit bit at that time. I thought, why not just agree to him? It's just a small matter. But I didn't expect it to be the last time. After he died, I kept asking myself over and over, why didn't I accompany him? Why didn't I tell him my feelings? Those bunches of lilies, that meticulous care, that focused gaze, didn't I truly notice that he loved me? I clearly knew, but I was a bastard who took advantage of love. I was convinced that Chris would grow old with me, indulging stubbornly in his love, but I never comforted his anxious heart. Until he died, I understood love, but the cruelest thing about belated love is losing it completely before having the chance to express it, before getting close. No more chances. Reborn in this life. It was a chance given to me by heaven for redemption. I couldn't care less about the reserve, shyness, gradual progress of love. I couldn't learn. I just wanted to be with him. Just wanted, most wanted, still wanted. So I hugged Chris tightly and then kissed his lips. As our lips touched, I gently gasped and said, "Okay, help me. I'll give you a reward in advance." Chris paused for a moment, then pushed me down on the sofa more deeply and heavily. 2 hours later, I was too tired to get up, but I held on to Chris tightly, unwilling to let go. I looked at him. I was clearly too tired to keep my eyes open, but still didn't want to close them. I was a little afraid that this was a dream. He leaned down and gently kissed my cheek, my forehead. "I'm here, Sara. Go to sleep. I'll always be here." I murmured in agreement. I couldn't hold on any longer and fell into darkness. In the darkness, I woke up suddenly. Dressed in a navy blue nightgown, I lay in a black and white themed bedroom with a glass of cold water on the bedside table next to white pills. Looking around, it was cold and empty, without that familiar person. A sharp pain pierced through me. Memories surfaced in my mind, scenes after scenes, finally stopping at that electrifying hoarse voice. "Sara, I really, really love you. It was just a dream." I realized it was indeed a beautiful dream. I tightly held onto my chest, feeling cold all over, as if being suffocated by a net, deprived of the right to breathe, tears falling one by one. "Sara, what's wrong?" Someone suddenly pushed open the door, walked to me, looking at me in a panic. With teary eyes, I wiped away the tears and finally saw the man's face clearly. "Sara, it's okay. I just went out to deal with the Bassett family's matters. I found the broker bought off by the Bassett family, and also the janitor who happened to pass by that day. He saw Zoe push Aaron down, Zoe was convicted, and the Bassett family members are currently being sued for false accusation by me. Sara, no one will falsely accuse you again in the future." The man gently patted my back, narrating everything that happened while I was asleep. I looked up at him, gently leaning into his arms, listening to the clear and strong heartbeat in his chest. I finally smiled. "It's okay. I missed you," I softly told him. "Chris Lowe, did I tell you before? I really, really love you." The man laughed and held me tightly in his arms. He said, "I love you too." After many years, lovers who were separated finally confessed their love to each other. Mountains, seas, time and space. Nothing could hinder the reunion of the lovers. Chris Lowe's story. I was reborn. After my rebirth, the first thing I did was to come to the Bassett house. But I found that the Bassett family was still harmonious. Sara was still the coldest and smartest goddess in the entire college. Not the Lady Lowe from the previous life who seemed gentle, but was actually deeply wounded. Sara lacked a sense of security. Prison was too harsh for her, and she was often envied and hated by others. Those inmates would deliberately torment her in the middle of the night. Even after being released from prison, she would be startled awake by the slightest noise while sleeping. And then, she couldn't fall back asleep. It was a sleepless night. But even so, she could flawlessly do her job during the day without making any mistakes. My Sara is fragile like snow, yet resilient like pine. It seems like a ray of light could easily melt her. But in reality, she is indestructible. I love her, and I admire her. At the school's freshman ceremony, Sara took the stage as the student union president to deliver a speech. I sat in the audience, looking from afar. The girl was dressed in a uniform, with her hair tied in a ponytail, revealing a beautiful yet innocent face. She freely displayed her beauty and showcased her knowledge, captivating many not only with her looks, but also with her words. At that moment, Sara was the youthful and innocent academic overachiever he remembered. Sara stood on the stage, the wind blowing across her face, tousling her hair. The sunlight seemed to favor her, giving her a light golden hue. Suddenly, I felt that it would be great if time could freeze at this moment. His Sara should never have to endure such hardships and turmoil again. Always remain pure. Smile when happy, bear the pain when sad, without facing gossip or mockery. That would be wonderful. I had already known that Zoe Bassett would encounter trouble, so I deliberately installed surveillance cameras in that secluded corridor. I was about to make it public when I received a distress call from Sara. At that moment, I knew Sara had returned as well. I wanted to know her attitude this time. I wanted to see how she would handle the Bassett family. This time, she refused to take the blame. She left the Bassett house. I saw her quietly dragging her luggage along the deserted Plane Tree Avenue. When she saw me, she smiled brightly, making me feel, the sunshine was so warm that day. I took her back home. I pretended to be unaware of everything. After much effort, I made a bowl of colorless noodles. Seeing her stunned expression, slowly guiding her to realize my love for her, seeing her heart tremble for me, I should have been overjoyed. But at the moment when I saw her tears, I felt heartbroken again. Forget it, I thought. Just loving her is enough. Does it really matter whether she loves me back or not? But in the end, she threw herself into my arms, holding me tightly, and told me, "Chrislo, I really, really love you." At that moment, I felt like flowers blooming all around. I tried hard to hold back the bitterness in my eyes and responded to my princess word by word. "I do too, Sara. I really, really love you too." People always say that people in love will always meet each other. I think, on the day we met, the sunshine must have been warm.